There are some regrets in life that are easy to recognize. Mistakes. We made choices we wish had gone differently, but later in life, many people begin to notice a different kind of regret, a quieter one, not about something that went wrong, but about something that was never fully lived, a path that was gently postponed, a truth that was softened, a version of yourself that kept waiting for a safer moment. At the time, these choices rarely felt like regret. They felt responsible, practical, necessary. Life was moving quickly. There were things that needed attention, people who depended on you, and so many small pieces of yourself were quietly set aside, not abandoned, just waiting for a calmer chapter of life. But later, when life finally begins to slow down, many people notice something unexpected. The mind starts looking back, not with anger, not with blame, just with a quiet curiosity. And in those moments, a simple realization appears that some regrets in life are not about mistakes. They are about the parts of ourselves we never fully allowed to breathe. Most people imagine regret as something loud, a wrong decision, a visible mistake. But many of the deepest regrets are not like that. They don't come with sharp memories. They don't appear as dramatic moments. Instead, they arrive quietly, like a small echo in the background of life, a sense that there were moments when the heart wanted something, and the mind said maybe later. Later, when life becomes calmer. Later, when responsibilities ease. Later, when the timing feels safer. And so the moment passes. At the time, it rarely feels like regret. It feels reasonable, practical, responsible. Life moves forward, years pass. Responsibilities grow, families need care. Work demands attention, and slowly, the small voice inside that once asked for something more becomes quieter, not because it disappeared, but because it learned to wait. Many people only notice this later in life, not with bitterness, not with anger, just with a quiet understanding that life was often lived for everyone else first, and sometimes the self was gently placed at the end of the line. There is a common belief many people carry through the middle years of life. Belief that there will always be time later, time to rest, time to travel, time to pursue the things the heart quietly loves. But life does not always move the way we imagine. Responsibilities appear, unexpected changes arrive, days become years faster than we expected, and many people discover that the life they once imagined living was slowly replaced by the life they needed to manage. This is not a tragedy. It is simply how life often unfolds. But when life begins to slow down in later years, something interesting happens. The mind finally has space. Space to look back, space to notice, space to remember the quiet wishes that once lived inside the heart. Sometimes those wishes are still there, waiting patiently. Sometimes they have softened, and sometimes they have transformed into something simpler. Not dreams of achievement, not grand ambitions, just small desires to live gently, to speak honestly, to spend time in ways that feel true. And for many people, this realization does not feel heavy. It feels honest, like finally seeing their own life with clear eyes. Many dreams do not disappear suddenly. They rarely end in a dramatic moment. More often, they fade quietly, almost unnoticed at first. The dream is still alive. It appears in small thoughts, in quiet moments before sleep, or in the brief pause between two busy days. A person might think, "One day I will try that. One day I will live differently. One day I will return to the things that make my heart feel alive." And at the time, this promise feels sincere, but life has its own rhythm. Responsibilities grow. Days fill quickly. One task replaces another dot, and slowly the dream moves a little further away. Not abandoned, just postponed. Postponed until life becomes easier. Postponed until the timing is right. Postponed until the moment finally feels safe. Years pass like this, and often the dream does not disappear. It simply becomes quieter, like a song playing in another room. Still there, but no longer at the center of life. Many people only notice this later, not with anger, not even with sadness. More like a gentle recognition that somewhere along the way, life became full of things that were necessary, and a little less full of things that once made the heart light. Yet even this realization is not always painful, because with time something else begins to appear, a quieter wisdom, the understanding that dreams do not always vanish. Sometimes they simply change form. What once looked like a grand life may slowly become a smaller one, but sometimes that smaller life contains a different kind of peace, not the excitement the younger self imagined, but something steadier, something calmer, and perhaps something closer to the truth of who we really are. When people speak about regret, they often imagine something harsh, mistake, a failure, a decision that should have been different. But many regrets carry a quieter truth. Regret is not always about something that went wrong. Sometimes regret simply means there was something in life that mattered deeply, something the heart once recognized as meaningful, and because it mattered, its absence can still be felt. This is why regret often appears only after many years, not when life is busy, not when survival demands all of our attention, but later, when life begins to slow. In those quieter years, the mind finally has space to see things differently, and when it does, regret often changes shape. At first it may feel like self-judgment, a voice saying, "I should have done more. I should have chosen differently. I should have known." But with time, that voice can soften because the truth gradually becomes clearer. Most people were not avoiding their dreams. They were protecting something else, a family, a responsibility, a fragile moment in life that required stability. Many choices that later become regrets were once acts of care, acts of responsibility, acts of love. And when this truth is finally seen clearly, regret begins to transform, not into pride, but into understanding, quiet realization that life is rarely as simple as we imagine. When we look backward, we see our younger self standing in a complicated moment, trying to choose with limited knowledge, trying to do what felt right at the time, and slowly something inside us softens. The harsh voice begins to fade, and in its place a different feeling appears compassion, not only for others, but for the person we once were. Many people wonder why regret often appears later in life. Why not earlier? Why not in the moment when those choices were made? The answer is surprisingly simple. For much of life, there is no space to reflect. The early years are often filled with urgency, building a life, supporting others, solving problems that cannot wait. In those years, the mind is focused on moving forward. There is little room to look back, but later in life, something changes. The pace slows. Responsibilities shift. The mind is no longer rushing from one task to the next, and when life slows, the mind finally has space. Space to revisit the past, not to judge it, but simply to see it more clearly. Memories return in a softer way. Moments that once seemed ordinary revealed their meaning, and sometimes this clarity brings regret, but not the kind that punishes, the kind that understands. It is the mind finally seeing the full picture of a life, not just the struggles, not just the decisions, but the quiet hopes that once lived inside those moments. And strangely, this awareness is not always painful, because along with regret, another realization appears, a deeper kindness toward the life that unfolded. For many people, the hardest part of regret is not the memory itself, it is the judgment that follows. A quiet voice inside the mind repeating the same words. I should have known, I should have done better, I should have chosen differently. This voice can be very convincing, because when we look backward, life often appears much clearer. But clarity is a gift of distance. It was not available in the moment those choices were made. The person who made those decisions was living in a very different moment, with different pressures, different fears, different responsibilities. They were doing what many people do, trying to make the best choice they could see at the time. And sometimes, when we look back with honest eyes, something important becomes visible. That younger version of ourselves was not careless. They were trying to protect something, trying to support someone, trying to keep life moving forward. And when we finally see this clearly, something begins to soften. The judgment loosens. The harsh voice grows quieter. In its place, a different feeling begins to appear. Compassion, not the kind we offer strangers, but the kind we offer ourselves. The recognition that life is rarely simple, and that the person we once were deserved understanding just as much as anyone else. Forgiving ourselves does not erase the past. It simply allows the heart to stop fighting it. When people first feel regret, they often believe it is something heavy, something painful, something they must somehow overcome. But over time, many people discover something surprising. Regret does not always remain. Regret, if it is held with patience and honesty, it slowly transforms. At first, regret simply asks to be seen, to be acknowledged, not pushed away, not explained, just noticed, like an old photograph found in a quiet drawer. You look at it for a moment, and something in the heart recognizes the person you once were, that their hopes, their fears, their limited understanding of the world at that time, and slowly regret begins to soften, because what once looked like a mistake starts to look like a moment inside a much larger life, a life that was never meant to be perfect, a life that unfolded through countless small decisions, some wise, some uncertain, some made with courage, some made simply to survive. And when we begin to see life this way, regret loses its sharp edges. It becomes something quieter, something gentler, a form of wisdom, not the kind found in books, but the kind that grows slowly inside a lived life, wisdom that understands how complicated being human can be, wisdom that recognizes the effort it took to walk through each stage of life. And with that wisdom comes something else, a quiet kindness toward the past, toward the person we once were, and toward the life that brought us to this moment. At this point, regret is no longer a burden. It becomes a teacher, a quiet reminder that every life contains unfinished dreams and also unexpected beauty. There comes a moment in many lives when the past no longer feels like something that must be corrected. It simply becomes a landscape we have walked through. Every path, every turn, every choice that once felt uncertain, all of it belongs to the life we lived. And slowly a quiet understanding appears. No life is perfectly shaped. No story is without unfinished pages. Every person carries dreams that changed form along the way. And yet when we look carefully, something else becomes visible. The strength it took to continue, the love that guided many decisions, the effort to protect what mattered most. These things are easy to overlook when we judge the past, but when we soften our view of life, they become clearer. And in that clarity, a different feeling begins to grow. Not regret, not pride, something quieter, peace. The peace of recognizing that the life you lived was never meant to be flawless. It was meant to be human. And perhaps the greatest wisdom that arrives in later years is this: to look at your life with the same kindness you would offer to someone you love, to see the effort, to see the courage, to see the heart behind every imperfect decision. And in that moment, the past no longer feels heavy. It simply becomes part of your story, a story that continues even now. And as this understanding settles gently inside the heart, many people notice something unexpected. The regret that once felt so important becomes quieter, and the life that once felt unfinished begins to feel complete.